Yes,
Hello.
season two. We still have this. This is a staple now. This is the inside joke. This is the staple. Okay.
Well, welcome to season two of Final Boss Banter. There are some things that I think we're going to change this season. We want to do kind of more gameplay things, more talking about like the gaming news and things in brief, and just sharing more things like that with each other. Um, so
I just remembered something.
go on.
I just remembered something. There is like a very high chance that me and Aisha are gonna be going to Japan. She just got her holiday approved. So potentially some content from that because I might go early. So I might go early alone
Mm.
and I want to do some like video game hunting. I've got like a list of things I want to buy and like I don't want to take the whole holiday just of me going into random like secondhand stores. So I've decided like if I can get a early flight, I might go early and then like go to these stores. So this is looking more like I completely forgot to tell you. Yeah, this is looking like much more likely now. So maybe content. I'm not gonna promise anything because I don't want to let anyone down, but maybe content from Japan as well. So that's gonna be.
Ooh,
I know. Yeah. Sorry.
exciting.
Sorry. I forgot. I forgot. I completely
No,
forgot.
no, that's important. I will also try my very best, but also no promises, to try and give some content this weekend coming up, which is the first collaboration between Comic Con, MCM, and EGX, which sounds like it's going to be great. Um, but also no promises because I may just be having such a fantastic time I completely forget about content and have to share pictures
Maybe
with you
short. Maybe
afterwards.
short. Maybe shorts. You know.
Ooh,
Maybe
maybe
short.
shorts.
Maybe short. Yeah. Just under 60 seconds because apparently YouTube doesn't like the 1 minute 5 seconds. Oh, it's a whole video now. Oh, come on. Now that sounds cool. When is it again?
So it's starting this Friday to this Sunday.
Okay, that's soon. That's soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a lot of stuff going on, really.
Yeah,
Oh
it's a
man, I
nice
feel so
time
bad.
to go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say it's a nice time to start season two.
Yeah, I feel like we've got a lot going on and I like it, you know. It's I feel like we needed the shake up and hopefully everyone enjoys the shake up of format. Um yeah, like I don't know if you want to explain what's gonna the change is gonna be. I can
No,
like
go
drop in a
ahead.
couple of bits. So, you know what, maybe it's easier if you do because my list is on my phone and I'm using my phone as my camera. So
Uh, did we make a list? Oh, whoops.
well, on the recap, let me try and remember then, because on the recap, basically, what one of the things we said we are going to do is try and lower the frequency
Mhm.
of maybe the full length podcast because we've got a little bit of feedback about it's hard to keep up with. So that's going to hopefully be one thing moving forward. Um, that being said, like we've just mentioned, we're going to hopefully have other things going on. So there might still be content dropping on that you'll be interested in, anyways. Um, that's the main thing I can remember. I think other stuff was maybe operational stuff. Like I don't think we're gonna go live as often
Mm.
because we found that there wasn't really that much engagement happening through live. Um, and I think a lot of our audience, it seems like, is on YouTube and they're watching it after we've gone live. So we rather just post it directly onto videos. And then I think the last thing was we're gonna maybe stop the Spotify as well. It wasn't actually that much effort, but it was more like an engagement thing. If people want it, we'll transfer the file. That's not a problem. But until we get a bit more engagement there, then
Mm.
we still got content on there. We've got like 5 hours of us rambling about you know, video games and stuff. So it's not like if you find us on there, you're not gonna find anything. So yeah, I think those were the main points, I think.
Mm. I think so. I can't remember anything else.
Yeah, those are the like top line. Everything else was like probably more operational for us. Um, but yeah, we might as well get into the episode proper, really.
Yep. Do you want to kick it
Um,
off?
yeah, so basically, this actually links to what I've been playing recently, yeah. And I
Mhm.
feel like I'm already gonna start a bit of a fire with with this episode. I can already feel it, yeah. Basically, I've been working through my backlog, right? I've compiled my list, like, because you know the backlog sometimes it gets like it it splinters. Do you know what I mean? Like 1 minute you're playing like Dreamcast, and the next minute you're playing like PlayStation 3, and so your backlog becomes very like fragmented, right? So I was like, you
Mm.
know what? Let me sit down, let me actually know exactly what my backlog is. And when I say backlog, for me, what that actually means is games that I've started and not completed. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, because I anything that I start, I like to finish. Yeah, like regardless. So, you know, I went through like literally my whole trophy list on PS3 of like games that I had started. PS4, it's not actually as long as you'd think. Um, I went through a lot of the list of, and for me, a lot of it is like story stuff because that's the kind of games that I like to play is like more story based, not really like multiplayer as such.
Mm.
But I went through the whole list. I compiled the list, and I got a list of like how many. Anyway, this links to my topic, by the way. Yeah. So one of the ones that was on my backlog was Gravity Rush 2, right?
Okay.
Um, I think we might have spoken about it like one on one. I don't remember us like talking about it on the podcast. We might have, but I basically made a thing to myself. I did like one mission a day, and I finally completed it. And I think I started it in like 2022 or 23, like literally forever ago. And the game's even older than that, I think, right?
Mm.
And I hate to say this, yeah, but it was such a below average game.
Oh.
And I know. I told you I'm gonna hurt some feelings today. This is okay. Look, the first one, I actually loved the first one, yeah,
Mm.
because it was such a different concept. It was like do you know about the game?
No, I just looked it up now. I love the cell shading.
Okay, so art style, a lot of different things about it was so cool. And I'm gonna say this right, the first game, it really captured me, right? Because it was on the PS Vita, that's where it initially came out on. So you basically got this like open world game, and it was so amazing for the Vita. It was like a triple full on triple A game, and it was like you could not get that kind of it was actually mind blowing to have that experience on the Vita, right? Like this is before we're talking about the Switch and Breath of the Wild. Like I think to me, I think that's why Breath of the Wild on Switch did so well. I don't necessarily think it was like the most amazing 10 out of 10 Zelda game. I think it was
Mm.
probably more to do with the technical advancement of like we have this massive open world game and it's on the Switch and you can take it anywhere with you. Like that just levels up a game so much, if you ask me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a big. I'm sure there's other elements of that game that were good, and for why I'm talking like I haven't completed it. I have completed that, by the way, but I'm sure there's other elements of why people like that game. But I genuinely think that when it came out like alongside when the Switch released, and I genuinely think that a big part of its success was like the mind-blowing aspect of having an open world game on that console. But I had that experience on the Vita. I feel like I've said that so many times about the Vita.
Mm.
But anyway, I had that experience with this game specifically. It was an open world game. It was a very unique concept. It had comic book art styles for some of the cutscenes, which I really enjoyed. Um, the story was a bit bizarre, but it was okay. So yeah, there was all these elements that were going for it. But I'm playing the console version now. It lost a little bit of that charm. It lost the like it was just basically it felt like any open world game. It was like, okay, what's the difference? Like, what are you bringing to the table that I basically haven't played like a million times over now? And I think the only aspects you can maybe really make the case for was the art style and maybe the gravity mechanic.
Mm.
But look, the gravity mechanic is fun, but this is the second game now, right? This is not like they did try to evolve it. They had basically new gravity styles or something like that, but honestly, like it felt very shallow. And like to have that comic book art style, it just I don't know. I think it lost some of that magic when it left the VR, if you ask me. And so now I'm just literally like trying to just get through the episodes because I'm like, I need to complete this. I'm trying to get through my backlog. And so this is basically the topic, yeah.
Yeah.
So the credits rolled on Gravity Rush 2. I feel like I completed it. However, if you go on the internet, it will say that there's another 3 chapters after the credits roll. So my question to you is, when the credits roll, does the post game content count? And what are your best and worst post game content experiences? That is my question, okay? Do, does it mean that you did not complete the game if you do not do the post game content?
Oh, there are very okay. So to answer your question, I would say no. I
So
th
you're saying you do not need to do the post game content to count as you did you so it still counts that you completed it.
yes, because if the credits have rolled, you've completed the game.
Okay.
Because in my mind, it's like if you play a game, um, and it has like an ending, that's it.
Okay.
But then over time, they update and they change and they'll add like DLCs and little things. They're like, oh, we forgot to add this bit and we're changing this bit. It's like, how many games have you played where even the middle of the game they've suddenly like taken out a section or added in a whole new fight scene and character, and it's like, oh, but I completed that when that didn't exist. Does that mean I now it's like it doesn't mean it's now incomplete because I did it. I got to the end. I didn't have that scene because it didn't exist. And so it's like your backlog, it's like when you played it, when it first came out, that was all there was. And like that extra things at the end were probably things that didn't fit into the game properly. Um but yeah, and like for me, I don't play a lot of games that have an actual end.
Yeah. Like the
Um
warranty game.
yes. Because I was thinking I play The Sims a lot, but there's no end to The Sims because you just have children and they continue life, or you become a vampire and drink a potion of immortality and never die. So there is never an end. It doesn't mean that your family die around you though, which is kind of unfortunate. And then your family tree becomes so long that you crash the game. Um, personal experience. But yeah,
Okay,
because even
okay.
like with Minecraft, the end credits roll when you beat the Ender Dragon, but the game doesn't end because there's other stuff to do. There's loads of like new things.
We're saying that you did complete the game. See, this is something I was struggling with, so it's very interesting to hear your thoughts.
Mm.
Um, Sorry, carry on. Ender Dragon.
Yeah, so the credits roll when you beat the Ender Dragon, but there's still so many things to do, so many islands to find, like the mushroom cows. So it's like it's not
Mhm.
over. It's just the end game bit is over. And when that game first came out, I don't think it had an ending. And then the ending came later, and then the other things. Like it's always updating. Like at the moment, I am in like a mission to tame every single wolf because before you had one type of wolf and that was it, and now you've got six. And so I'm now, but they're
Mm,
all in different biomes, so I'm now traveling the world to try and find all six wolves. I've got one wolf left. It's taken me many months, but I'm proud of my endeavors. But also they're adding new enemies, and they're also adding like a bag of holding where you're not limited by what's in your by the kind of like slots that you have, which is a really fascinating change for Minecraft and will be really useful. Um, so it's like there will always be new things. Oh, and there's a new animal. There's an armadillo, but I can't bring myself to kill it because it gives you wolf armor, but it's just too cute. I can't do it.
I find your perspective very interesting because I feel like you've taken a very like modern stance on it, like with the updates and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
Uh, I'll explain, right? So like the this when I started writing this topic, the first thing that actually came to my mind,
What?
Pokemon.
Ah.
Pokemon, yeah. Yeah, because think about it, right? Yeah, and so this is why I think that your take is a very good take, but it's a very modern take as well.
Mm.
Pokemon technically has the end game content. After you beat the Elite Four, you see the ending. The whole end game content is basically to collect the rest of the Pokemon you don't have.
Mm.
and collect the legendaries and collect, like, if we're going by, like, let's say Pokemon Red, like try and catch Mew and Mewtwo. Mewtwo is basically the iconic end game, post game content. Do you know what I mean? Like, you, like, imagine back before the internet, you're like just looking around for places you weren't allowed to go before. You stumble upon a cave, you go in the cave, and there's a random Pokemon that you've never seen through your entire playthrough. Um, so would you count that you completed the game if you didn't capture all the Pokemon and if you didn't capture the Mewtwo? But technically, the content has all, like, the credits have already rolled.
Yes.
Do you
Because,
see what I mean? So that's where I was getting confused because I was like, well, technically the credits have rolled, but also technically there is still Mewtwo to catch. But I felt like, just like in terms of where my head was, I felt like you do not need to catch Mewtwo to feel like you completed the game.
yeah, I agree. Because it's like, especially I don't know. I don't play a lot of games like this, but I'm thinking of like when I used to play things like Spyro, and when you get
Yeah,
to, I can't remember which Spyro it was, but you get to the end and it tells you how many eggs, is it eggs, and then gems, and then something else that you have got in the game, and how many were
yeah,
in the world, and how many you got out of that. And it's just kind of like, but you can go on. I don't have to catch, I don't have to collect every single one. I mean, I can if I want to be a like complete
yeah,
completionist, but it doesn't alter the game in that in the sense of that I can still enjoy it, I can still progress. So it really depends on
yeah.
how you play games. Like when you say you want to complete something, do you want to complete it so that everything is 100%? You found every secret Easter egg, you went down every kind of like alternative path, or do you just want to follow the story through to see if you like it, and then like if you don't get everything, go back and redo it?
Okay, new question.
Mhm.
This actually links to something. This is still the same topic, but this
Yeah.
kind of links to Detroit Become Human that
Yeah.
we spoke about last time. But I'm going to add two other games into the mix, right? Near Automata, or whatever it's called. I'm sure you've heard of the game.
I haven't played
But it's
it.
called Near Automata and Shadow the Hedgehog, which is a really old game now, but Shadow the Hedgehog, okay? These all very random, but they all have one thing in common, which is multiple endings, okay?
Mm.
So I got a new question, okay? Shadow, funnily enough, Shadow and Neo probably have this in common. Maybe not Detroit, because I feel like there is probably some kind of canon ending for Detroit. But if you get one ending on those games, you see the credits. Does that still count? Because there is a true ending on Nier and Shadow.
Yes.
That still counts.
Yes. You've completed it.
Oh, thank God you said that. You know what? Yeah, I was playing Nier. I was playing Nier, and like, I hate to say this again. Like, I just wasn't enjoying it that much. Like, literally, okay, it was made by Platinum Games, which
Mm.
I love, like their combat and everything that they put into some of these games. Like, I really love, like, I love some of those games, like the Platinum games. Like, they've made Bayonetta, they've made I think a portion of their team made, like, before they left, they made helped make Devil May Cry, they made Metal Gear Rising. Like, they've made some of my favorite games. So when I was playing Nier, I was expecting, like, oh, like this is gonna be pretty good because they know what they're doing. And the
Mm.
combat was okay, but I just couldn't get into it. Um, and basically they have this thing, yeah, in Nier Automata, they have this thing where it's like they have an ending for every letter of the alphabet or something like that. And
Okay.
I got like the one of the most common endings, and I think it took me around 5 or 6 hours to get to complete the game. And I was like, I can't even remotely do this again, like another like 20. Like, I think there's maybe another 3 or 4 storylines that are like 5 hours each.
Mm.
But it was like retreading the same ground, but with a different perspective on the story. And I was like, if the gameplay is like mostly the same, I can't do this again. Like, it's not captivating enough for me to like go through this again another 3 times. So I'm so glad you said that it counts because I completed it once. I saw the credits roll and I was like, that counts. I'm out. I'm out. I can't do this again. Um, yeah, and obviously Shadow the Hedgehog famously has like multiple endings, and then there's like a true ending. But again, like trying to play that game like so many times. It takes a toll, like especially when look, the mechanics have to be like rock solid. And I'm not saying they're not in some of these games, but it just wasn't enough for me to warrant like going back in for another 15 hours or something like that. Like there's too much time on like the same mechanics.
Yeah.
Um even Detroit, like I get like it's a good game, the story's really good, but would you be willing to put in like another like 20, 30, 40 hours on basically like a button prompt? Do you know what I mean? To get all the endings, like
Okay.
it's just
Okay. Two things. One, yes, 100% for Detroit. I would play that game 1,000 times over. Two, it's different because there are some there are some things that happen that you don't have to react to, and
yeah,
there are some bits that are kind of like combatty. There's some bits that kind of like are logic puzzles. There are some things that are conversation and kind of like demand a certain emotion intelligence. So it's very, very different. And there are certain
yeah,
things where if you do something differently, um, you get a completely different like track. Like for example, I played it, spoilers, and I didn't want to steal anything, so I ended up hiding in a broken down car. But my sister played it, and she played it twice. And the first time, she ended up um, robbing a till so that she could stay in a hotel, because she's like, oh, I don't want the little girl to get a cold. And I was like, oh, I selfishly didn't think of that. I was just thinking about me and my moral quandaries. I didn't even think about, oh, this abandoned car, possibly tetanus and like pneumonia um, territory. And then the second time she played it, she got into a house so that they got to sleep by a fire. And I was like, I didn't even know you could go in this house. And there was like a whole character in the house with like its own unique character arc that I never got, which means that later on I wasn't able to unlock another conversation. And
yeah.
like
I
even
think
in that
Detroit was probably a bad example for me because it's too unique of experiences.
but I think that it's a good example in the sense of that more games should do things like that. Whereas like the
Mm.
replayability is not just like, oh, you need to do this again. Because also you can pick to start from different chapters once you've done them. So you don't have to go back. You can be like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I picked B instead of A in that chapter. And like if you don't care about the rest of the story and you're just like, I just want to know what would be different in that one, you can just do that one. And it's like I think it's a good example for other games to be like, if you're going to do a branching narrative, because I think to me the point of a branching narrative is so that I can play it again, not just so that I can get a unique experience. I mean, that's great, but if I don't feel like playing it again, like you said, if it feels like I'd be trapped just trying to see what happens if when I get to like the last bit I said something different, or I just walked away, or I didn't pick up that haunted weapon. And it's just like, do I really want to invest that time? And like by giving you the option to not have to do that, I think it makes people more want to do it, because then they kind of like have that experience and they're like, oh, actually that was kind of interesting. I wonder what happens if I go to the next chapter. How did that change it?
Okay, okay. Fair enough, fair enough. I hear what you're saying. I think, branching narrative games, I think they can be done very well. And I think what we're really saying in that sense is that those kind of games, the replayability is good, but technically your first playthrough, it still counts as you completed the game.
Yes.
All right, cool. Because I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking of The Wolf Among Us. Have you played that?
No, but I watched you play it.
Really?
Yeah, when we were in uni.
Oh, right. Damn, man. Anyway, that game, that game, right?
Yeah.
That game, like technically your first playthrough, I would say you've completed the game, but ask me how many times I've played that. I've played it like at least two, three times. Um, so, I think what we're saying with the branching narratives is that, yeah, your first playthrough counts. All right, cool. I'm glad we landed on that though, because I was feeling a bit guilty, you know. I was like, oh man, like literally as I completed the game, like she landed somewhere, and then there was this like golden like person that came, and then it was like she flew off. And then when I researched it, it was like, you have to do this many side quests and then go and find this person. I was like, man, technically the credits roll, like release me, release me. I was like, let me go. I don't want to do this anymore. Man, I feel so sorry for the Gravity Rush 2 fans out there, but you know, I just want to get through my backlog. You know what I mean? I just want to get through my backlog. Okay. Okay, now we've spoken a bit. Do you have a topic you want to bring, or I can just go on to the next one?
Um, have you played Silent Hill?
Are you talking about this because the new Silent Hill remake came out?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was younger, no. And actually the whole entire answer is just no. But it's not because it's not because like I thought it was a bad game or anything. I think when I was young, I just never played it, or like no one ever mentioned it to me.
Mm,
And I think I always thought that the games weren't interlinked. I always thought it was like a different protagonist.
yeah.
So it didn't feel like, oh, if I play this, then I don't know. And I'm not really a massive like horror type, you know, like I'm not like dying for those experiences. So I never really looked into it. But that being said, um, a lot of the new stuff does look quite good. I do like how the new one looks, and I do like Resident Evil, but I think I like Resident Evil because of like the action. It's more like action focused rather than like horror focused, and I guess there's more of a nostalgic element for me with Resident Evil because I have some vague memories of like probably shouldn't have been watching it at a young age, but I was. So yeah.
Okay. I'm also
What?
more of a watcher of Silent Hill than a player. Um,
Okay.
but I'm really impressed by the remake. I feel like they did a lot of the scenes like justice for a
Mm.
remake, and the acting is definitely, not to say the acting was bad in the original. It just, it was a bit, it
Just
wasn't
say what
very,
you think.
it wasn't very
They're not gonna
emotive.
listen to this.
It lacks the emotional kind of resonance for me, whereas this one I think is slightly better in terms of like, I feel like as good as a video game can be, because I think sometimes it's hard to have that emotional resonance in a video game where you're relying on the player to be doing stuff and possibly talking over them, like ransacking some sort of box, and then like then over that trying to do like a heartfelt speech over like, oh, I remember the way that she loved this, and the player's just like, no, don't need that, don't need that, oh, stealing that. And it's like, it's hard to like combine those two things together. So I think that in like video games that can be quite challenging, and I think most video games try to do like, oh, you're climbing a ladder or you're running down a hallway. Now is a time for an emotional speech because you can't possibly ruin this moment because all I need you to do is be moving forward. Um, and even some of the scenes that they changed, like well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but it is brilliant, and I definitely think,
I think I might actually get around to playing that.
do you know what? I think I might play it too, but at the moment I don't know. I feel like I'm getting into horror games. I recently played one. I don't know if I told you about it. Called so do you know? It's called Indigo Park. So do you know like Five Nights at Freddy's and
Yes,
Joyville
yes.
and the Garden of Banban, like all of those kind of oh, what are they called? Mascot horrors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which I find quite fascinating, and
Train
so
of Terror.
yeah. But
What is it called? It's like a, is that what it's actually called?
the I
The
don't
one that
know.
looks like it's the tank engine, but it's like horror.
Oh,
Please tell me
Choo
you've
Choo
seen.
Charles.
That's the one.
That's hilarious. But Indigo Park is, it's got like a cute raccoon called Rambly the raccoon, and he's like an AI, and it's like the whole time you're playing it, it's not like the other ones because there are very few jump scares. there's more kind of like things looking around the corner at you, and it's like you're having a great time, and it's like you're more paranoid that it's taking like that liminal space of like you're alone, but there's something out there watching you, and you don't know where they are, what they want, or like how close they are. And so it's more you scaring yourself than anything else. And I think that's very clever. And the raccoon's so cute, and he's just so adorable. And because he's an AI, like it's kind of like put into the speech. Like there's a bit where he's like, "Oh, I see by my facial recognition tracking that you're upset, angry," and it's like, "Oh, rambly." But it's such a really really great game, and I'm really looking forward to like the next chapters. And I don't normally follow chapter games, and I don't normally want to play horror games. I like to watch them because I think we're talking about this, I love the audio of horror games. Like a well done audio in a horror game, I'm like, yes. Because I think because they're trying to augment the senses and
Mm,
kind of like immerse you in the world so that they can scare you, the audio is usually just some of the best in games when it's a game that's either kind of like combat based or kind of like horror or even like psychological horror. The the audio in that is usually really really impressive, and they understand the kind of the necessity of the audio that I find other games ignore, like the sound of you moving in like a coat or like fabric falling, which I find that a lot of games tend to just ignore those sounds. Like you go through um like a cloth curtain, and the sound is either it doesn't match the material or they just haven't made a sound for it, and the sound is you walking and not the environment. It's like, but that's important. And I feel like a lot of games are like, nah, it's fine. It's like, no, no, no. To immerse me in it, I need to hear everything. I want to hear the difference when I'm walking on metal to when I'm walking on ground. And it's like, even Baldur's Gate, I like the fact that when you're in heavy armor, as you run, you hear the armor clinking together, and it's not, as far as I know, unique to the armor, which would be nice, but it's nice that they put it in there, that there is that kind of like reflection of, oh, you're wearing armor and you're running around. You're noisy, you're clanky. It's like, yes, I would be, and that makes sense. That immerses me in that. Now I feel like I'm actually wearing the armor and it's not just decorative.
no, I hear that for sure. Like, I find, yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said there. And I think also like just talking about like horror games, I feel like there's more of a resurgence and refocus on it more recently, uh, both in AAA and the indie scene as well. I think
Mm,
indie is like right now going through like a golden age of horror style games, and I think a lot of it comes from like the streamers, they're playing it, and I think the audience gets captivated because like you say, you like watching it. So I think it's a very common thing that a lot of people like watching it. The one thing I would like to add is that I feel, especially in the AAA space, like what we're seeing with Silent Hill 2 and all this kind of stuff,
mm,
I feel like a lot of it is coming from the Resident Evil 2 remake. I think that was from that moment onwards, I feel like we've got a very strong sense of what these games could be, because that was like a remake that was so integral to the history of video games. And I say that because like if you brought up the horror genre to anyone, indie, AAA, whatever, I think at some point you have to say Resident Evil because of the age. It's so
yeah.
old. Like it went back to PS1, like it's been on so many consoles. So and then I think when you talk about one, two, or three, because they were all on like PlayStation 1, like everyone has such strong attachments and strong feelings towards those games. So any of those games that you're taking and remaking, like people are gonna look at that with like a microscope. And the fact that they manage not only to deliver an amazing product, but gain so many new fans, I think it goes to show what could be done with like an existing IP of that age, and also with I think it's so many angles. Existing IP, the age of it, the horror genre, like there's so many benefits that came from that.
Mm,
And I think that carries over into a lot of what we're seeing now. We're seeing obviously what you've said with Silent Hills. I think Konami um, the publishers of Metal Gear and stuff, like they also have I think they are in charge of Silent Hills, right? But they had PT, right, which I'll probably talk about later. But they
Mm,
had PT, which was I think it standing for playable trailer, and that was like a horror experience. So you can see they're refocusing the efforts back on this side of the genre because you could make the case that for a company like Konami, they should just focus on their main cash cow, which is probably Metal Gear. To be fair, like I think they got Metal Gear, Castlevania, and Silent Hills. But
yeah.
out of the three of them, Metal Gear is probably like the most like in terms of making money. I would put my money like I if it was me, I would put my money down on that. Not just saying that as a fan. Um, but purely like look, if you look at Metal Gear Solid 5 sales, I think it did this. It exceeded the sales of Avengers: Age of Ultron at the time, and you know how big Avengers movies are. So I think it goes to show like that was a big thing for them. But you can see that they're looking at the other side of what they have now because and I think it's in part due to a game like Resident Evil 2 remake. So that's what I wanted to add in on that. In terms of the sound stuff, again, I couldn't agree with you more. And like the first game that came into my mind actually was BioShock. Have you played that?
Mm, no, I started it, didn't finish it. It's on the
Yeah,
list.
so it's on the list, yeah. But like when you look at like, and I'm talking purely of the intro actually, right? You must have played like the first hour or so, right?
I didn't get that far.
Okay, look, it's not really a spoiler because it is the beginning, right? But
Yeah.
you crash into the ocean, and to your point, like the sounds are so important because you don't actually have that much feedback in terms of, you're in the ocean, you're not actually looking at much. So they make the waves sound like sinister, like which kind of sounds mental, but at the same time, like there's a way to do that, right? Like
Mm,
we just might not know how to do that, but they succeeded in that. Then you get into the lighthouse, and the lighthouse, like a light could be swinging or something could be like you're just like so tuned into all of these different like elements, and yeah, so I couldn't agree with you more. Like having that focus on all of those individual aspects. And then what I like about that as well is when a game starts like that, or when a game incorporates it at some point during the the actual course of the playthrough, um, that the following sounds, the following focus on the sounds is going to be to a very high quality because they spent one scene on just focusing on sound. So you already know they've acknowledged how important the sounds are. So now I trust you moving forward that the sounds are going to be like top tier. Even if there's like explosion, this, that, I'm shooting a gun, I'm reloading, like I'm still expecting like a high quality of like Foley and sound design because you've already showed me you're capable of it. So
yeah.
you're not going to go back, you're not going to go you're not going to downgrade your capability, like you're just not, or that's not what I would expect. So yeah, honestly, good shout.
I think
um
also I'm really liking, and I don't know if it's gonna go into the mainstream. It might already have gone into AAA games, and it just passed me by. But I'm loving like Chillers Art and Puppet Combo. Puppet is it called? Are they called Puppet Combo? I'm sure they're called Puppet Combo, and they make horror style like horror PS. I would say PS1 style um games,
uh
and
yeah.
I think it's brilliant because it shows the advancements that we've had, not just them, but anyone making like PS1 style games. It shows the advancements that we've had in video games that can still be applied to that kind of artistic rendering of the kind of like blocky figures, and sometimes you can have like the filter of the old TVs. Is it a CRT TV? I can't remember. I'm not that up
Yeah,
on
yeah,
TVs,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
and I love that, but because they can still add like the audio elements, the gameplay elements, the narratives that we've now learned with other games being inspirational in that oh, this would be better if I did it this way, or if I gave players this agency. And it's like it's so cool to be able to apply that concept and have that kind of like simplified graphics, because you can still display that kind of like atmosphere, it doesn't have to be photorealistic. And I think we've talked about this with ice with art style, that actually there's a lot of things that are kind of pushing towards that photorealism, and it's like it's fun, but it's not like the be all and end all. It's not always necessary. Sometimes just a nice art style, or a really simple one, or a really terrible one intentionally, is fine.
Yeah, yeah, I completely, again, I completely agree with you because, like if you look at something like Wolf Among Us, like what we just spoke about, that art style wasn't exactly like photorealism, and it wasn't even like necessarily exactly like their comics either.
Mm,
Um, like I've read a couple of the Fable comics, and they, in fact, if anything, the comics was probably trying to go for a level of photorealism. So, and I think they still were able to get the gravity of a situation across. Like you always felt like, oh, I'm a detective, or oh, I need to solve this, or I need to solve that, or oh, like he's turning into, like it always felt like something big was happening, or something deep was happening for the characters. Not, maybe not necessarily scary. I mean, I don't know if they were going for scary all the time, but it does
mm,
go to show that the art style can affect those emotions to that level. So, when you're talking about like a PS1 style, thing, I think a lot of the fear lives in your head
yep.
because you are kind of bringing it to life in that sense. Whereas when it's photorealistic, you're scared of exactly what it is. Like, again, even Resident Evil 2 remake, um, there's a tyrant which basically follows you around, and like it's never necessarily he looks scary, but it's more like I've just stepped into the room, the music has started, he's now in the room, and if I don't keep moving, he will literally like squeeze my head or something. So
Mm,
it's not like you're looking at him like, oh, I'm scared of how he looks because it's photorealistic. It's more like he's exerting this pressure on you, and you're scared of that pressure. So
yeah.
I think that side of it comes from different angles, not just the look.
That being said, mannequins will always be scary in games. And for me personally, mannequins are scary for two reasons. One, because of like the uncanny valley idea of that they're meant to be human but also not quite human, because they're meant to make you reflect that you are them, and that how you would look in the clothes that they're wearing. They're more of like a arbitrary hanger. And like that is always disturbed me. And two, I don't like things that do things they shouldn't. It's like a mannequin like in a game. If there's a mannequin, I'm okay. It's when I look away and I look back and the mannequin has moved, or like its head is turning towards me, or its head is following me, and it's like, okay, no, no. You don't do anything. That is your complete role, and I don't like that you're doing something. And I think in the I think, was it the Resident Evil the Village with the mannequins and the way that they moved, like, oh, like the weeping angels from Doctor Who, when you're not looking.
Just about to say that.
Like that bothered me because I was like, no, 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 you do not move, you stay still, this is your only role in life, I don't like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that episode got to you.
But
It's
I
like
didn't.
secret,
That's always been my.
secret,
Go on, sorry.
secret trauma.
That
That
has
what?
always been my least favorite monster in Doctor Who. It's like Cybermen, you can see them coming. Daleks have only just learned to climb stairs. You can see them coming. But the Weeping Angels, it's like, oh, I don't like that. And then when there was that episode where they added more lore, and it was like, oh, any image of a weeping angel becomes a weeping angel. And it was like, oh, why did you do that? It's like as if they're not bad enough, but now if you were trying to video a weeping angel, the video becomes a weeping angel, and it's like, oh, just send them somewhere far away. I don't want to destroy them because I feel
No.
bad. I don't want genocide. I just want to be where they're not, or for them to be where I'm not. Let's just not be together.
Sounds like you might have our next indie game development just purely based around that.
Oh,
Don't worry, you can be lead designer in it. Don't worry.
oh, have you played that? So there's a horror game. I know you don't really play horror games where if the whole game is just you walking through a forest. I can't remember what it's called. And if you make a sound, you lose and you have to start the game again. But literally the game is like nothing can actually hurt you. You're just walking through the forest and there's like jump scares and like things in the distance or like thing crawling up or like running at you and it's so scary. Obviously I lost because even like the microphone sensitivity is just it's mildly obnoxious. You can change it, but it's like even like a gasp is like, oh, you made a sound. Back to the beginning. It's like I've been here for like 10 minutes. I was so close, but it's so
I feel
clever.
I feel like I lived that in real life recently, so I think I'm all right. Um, no, you know what? Speaking of like horror games and that kind of sort of type of thing, right?
Mm.
I have a next. I'm gonna go to the next topic if that's
Yep.
cool.
Go ahead.
The next topic, right? Because we were talking about PT, playable trailer, everything like that. So the topic is basically around why do cancelled games so often evoke a sense of sadness among fans? So this basically, I mean, I feel like it's kind of obvious at the same time, but this is basically around like cancelled games, any games that like really upset you when you found out they were cancelled, um, that kind of stuff. So I'll give you a second to think, and I'll talk about like a couple that I don't know if I was necessarily sad about like why it was cancelled or anything like that. But I'll start with like let's say PT, right?
Mm.
I think it was disappointing because it felt like it was the next big thing that Kojima was gonna make. Like I think he's made a few like horror games before,
Mm.
and he does storytelling so well. And then I think also at the end of that trailer, you learned that he was partnering with like a famous actor, so it felt like something really special. And like the trailer, the game or trailer, whatever you want to call it, like I think it was like 4 hours. It was like a loop of one corridor. I don't know if you've ever played it or seen it.
I actually it's on my list to kind of either play or watch some let's plays of it, but I just haven't got around to it.
So basically, what I'll just give you like a quick breakdown of what to expect, which
Mm.
is it's basically like one or two hallways that are all connected, and you basically loop around it. And every time you successfully do a loop, um, you basically get a new puzzle to do in the same area. And then every time you complete a puzzle, you basically get a bit more of the lore.
Okay.
And pretty much everything we spoke about is present, you know, sound design, suspense, everything, right? And I mean, that whole situation was just disappointing anyway. The whole thing about like, you know, he left the company and this happened, XYZ, all that kind of stuff. For me, I think, if we're talking about games that I personally was more like disappointed by, it's hard to remember because I feel like as soon as I realized it canceled, like I put it out of my mind, because like not to expect it again. But one of them was maybe Scalebound. I don't know if you heard of that. But basically,
Oh,
this again, dragons.
no, I'm thinking of a different one.
Okay, so basically, this was like supposed to be the big action game for Xbox,
Mm.
right? And it was made by the people who made like Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, like a lot of these kind of games. So you were expecting something really special, right? And every
Mm.
time, every showcase, they always showed a different portion of the game, and you were gonna tame a dragon, and then it became in this like MMO type of thing where all your friends are riding dragons now, and the dragons looked really cool, and you know, this Dragon Slayer guy, he had all the attitude, and it was like really this cool like rock. He had these headphones, it was just this whole thing, right? And again, like I'm not saying I was like mad disappointed about it, but I just find it so interesting, like when projects like that and so much money and backing go into them, you know, and they get cancelled, it has such a big effect on the community, I think. Um,
Mm.
And I'm not just talking about that game. I think where this actually came from, where this idea of the topic came from for me was basically Skull and Bones. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, they had a very tumultuous like development cycle. It actually got developed near me at Ubisoft Singapore.
Okay.
So apparently they had a deal or something where if it got developed in Singapore, like the government was going to help them with some of the budgets or some. There's like so many issues with that, and it's like, and then I think a YouTube recommended popped up on my thing, which was like the title was like this. It was I played Skull and Bones, then I went back and played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which is like a 6 7 year old game,
Mm.
and I just found it so interesting that again, I'm probably straying away from cancelled games or whatever, but I found it so interesting that like you can make a game like now have all these issues, and it's firstly by not by my standards, but by what other people are saying is like not a very good game, to the point where they started looking at older games and other stuff like other media because it basically failed. And I just thought it's such a like dichotomy of like canceling and all this kind of stuff, and it just sucks, I guess.
Yeah, I just brought up my Steam wish list because I was like, oh, I've been looking at my wish list a lot lately, kind of like longingly and sadly, because the top thing on my wish list is so before the top thing on my wish list was Life by You, which was made by the people who made City Skylines, and
Okay.
like every time it got close to the time when they were like, it's going to come out, suddenly they'd be like, oh, actually, you're gonna have to wait a couple more months. So I can't remember the
Yeah.
exact date, but it was like it was meant to come out last year at the end of the year, and then it was like, oh, actually, we've got more work to do. You need to wait till was it January or April? And it was like, okay, fine. I really want this game, so I will wait. I would pay for it now and wait. I want it that badly. And then it got to April and they were like, oh, actually, can you wait till September or like August? And it was like, okay, I can do this. I am a strong gamer. I can wait. And then it got to that time and they were like, actually, we're canceling the whole thing. We're shutting down the studio. We're firing everyone. And it was like, hold on a second. Why? And like the community was so upset, and like there were so many people who were like, "Oh, I actually got to play it because I didn't get onto the play test unfortunately, but I saw some people and it was like this is amazing. This is what we need." And I think because I like playing things like The Sims, but I'm sure that I have probably said it a thousand times, my unpopular opinion that The Sims 4 is the worst in the entire series and was the most disappointing game for me, and I'm so glad that it's free now, because I didn't pay full price for it. I think I got it on sale for £4 because I watched some gameplay and I played my friend's version when I went to her house, and I was like, this is awful. This is like, if ever there was a game where I was like, this is the worst game, it was the worst game, not because it was the worst game, but because okay, imagine Sims 1, if you've got all the expansion packs, you can like go on dates, you can have your own baby dragon, you can have magical jewels, and you're like, okay, this is cool. Sims 2, you like can start your own business, you can have a pet, you can have an alien child and get abducted and um be a vampire and all of those things, and it's like, okay, this is great, it's more realistic. I still am like trapped within my house in a map and have to like go to a loading screen to go somewhere, but I accept it. Sims 3, open world. I can go to university. I can travel to Egypt, China, France. I can make wine out of grapes. I can grow my own garden. I can become a vampire, werewolf, fairy, genie. I think you can become a mermaid at some point, but I haven't managed to do it because that game was broken. But either way, it's like, okay, you've given me everything I've ever wanted. I'm sad you haven't given me back magic and you haven't given me back making my own business, but what you've given me is like, this is enough. I can befriend a unicorn if you can befriend a unicorn, because that unicorn is just, it wants everything from you. It's like, okay, now we're friends. Oh, but you're not very close with nature. It's like, okay, now I've got the top gardening. Oh, but you don't like your animal friends and wild animals is not great. Okay, fine. Now I know the deers and the raccoons. Will you be my friend? It's like, I don't know, I'm just not feeling it. It's like, you know what, fine, unicorn. Just stay outside. But it was like they gave you everything you wanted. You could swim in the water. A game that allows you to swim is like quite rare to me. It's like usually you hit the water, you die, or like the water is the barrier, and it's like everything ends here. Whereas like The Sims is like, no, 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 you swim. You want to swim across the river? It's a terrible idea. You'll end up wet when you're on the other side. But even that realism of like soaking wet because you jumped in the river for a little while until you dry off. It's like, yes, you gave me everything I wanted. Then The Sims 4 was announced, and it's like, okay, I'm expecting this, but better, and you're bringing back magic. And then it was like, actually, we're going to take away the open world, we're going to take away the color wheel, and we're going to tell you what clothes you want to wear. And I can't remember what else they took away. And they added some things that was like, oh, you can now do a thing like paint and cook and have a conversation. And it's like, that's cool, but I want to be able to walk down the road. I don't want to have to loading screen to go somewhere. It's like, I feel like that's a simple one. And then even now, the one they're working on, I've seen it and it looks closer to like The Sims Mobile, which I also hated because the same issue. Because it's like, I want that realism of like walking to the shop. I want that realism of like, I have to carry my shopping back home, that I can be over encumbered, which is not something they added, or that food spoils in your inventory, like as it would if you left a cake or a sandwich in there, you'd start to smell after a while because that's disgusting to keep those sorts of things in your pocket. And it's like, or even like having the phone and being able to take a selfie sometimes, or like take a cute video. And it's like, yeah, that's what I want from you. How dare you take that away from me? And there hasn't been anything to rival it. So when that was like when Life by Life was it Life by You? Okay, was like coming out. It's like, yes, rival The Sims. They need it. They need someone to be like, we can do it better, so that they can push themselves to be better. And like now, I'm like actively awaiting Paralives. And just what we were talking about, they're not photorealistic because that's not what you need. Even though you've got like Inzoi, which is photorealistic, but allows you to create your own clothing and like share digital fashion, which I am absolutely into. And then you've got Vivaland, but they're all coming out next year. It was meant to be this year, and they've all kind of like pushed back, and it's like, please don't do what Life by You did to me because I can't handle another heartbreak. Because Life by You also had like a, I don't know if you've ever seen like the programming on um Unreal, where it's like the visual scripting of the blueprints and kind of like a mind map. They had that sort of visual scripting where you could like have your own not audio, but your own kind of like track of like, oh, when someone says hi, these are the appropriate responses, and like create this whole kind of subculture within the world for yourself. And I was like, I love this. I love this idea of being able to have the freedom to create a world that makes sense to me, and like add in colloquial terms and like swearing if that's your thing. I don't really swear, but I like the idea that someone could have a game like that and have that freedom to make it true to life, because The Sims is very tame in the sense of that you don't swear. You can have a fight, but it's like a cartoon dust cloud. Actually, can you fight in The Sims 4? I don't know, but you can fight in The Sims 3, and you can go to jail. I was a criminal mastermind. Fun times. You arrive home with random things in your inventory, like cars, and you're like, I'm not really sure how you stole that or why, but it's part of the job. But yeah, and then like the Twinson Little Big Adventures just said coming soon forever. And I'm really hoping that it's not cancelled. And I could probably look it up, but when you're like, oh, but then if I look it up, then it's really true. Whereas if I don't, I can always hope that it might be a thing.
You like to live in the delusion, yeah?
I Until it says cancelled and it's deleted off my wish list, it's like I will believe in you, Twinson. Because I think we've spoken about this. It's the first game I remember watching my mum play, and I was like, oh, what is this little man with a ponytail running around and this puzzle thing? And I just like, now they're doing like a remaster. I'm like, I want to play this. I want to play this for myself. And it's like the remastered version is like a beautiful kind of like a transition. Like I watched the original being played, and now I can play the remastered version for my own era, and like share that with my mum. The coming soon is hurting the heart though. It's like I need dates, I need times.
Yeah, it's really disappointing when a game doesn't pull through like the way you want it to.
Mm.
And I think you've hit on a very big point there. I think the main point of why I feel like a lot of people feel the way they do is because it's basically time in it. It's time invested. It's and then sometimes it's emotions invested as well, right?
Mm.
Because like you don't know them, but you never want to hear like, oh, this many people got laid off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's never nice news for anything, right? Like, regardless whether it's your favorite fashion brand or something else, you never want to hear like, 100 people got laid off. And then when it's linked to something that you waited for, I feel like all those emotions just come crashing down. So I feel like you pretty much hit the nail on the head in that sense because it's basically just time, right? Like,
Mm.
even with Scalebound, what I was talking about, you know, that was probably like advertised for like 2 years, 3 years, something like that. And you just wait and wait and wait, and then you never get the closure of like what actually was that game. Because when something comes out and it's bad, I think that's almost like a different thing entirely, because you're able to form an opinion on it. Like that's what hurts more, right? Because you can wait. Let's say you waited however long you waited, and then Life by You came out and you didn't like it. That's still closure in a sense, right?
Yep.
Because you didn't like it, and it was like, okay, I waited, I didn't like it, and that happens sometimes. But when it's like you just never know, and because the only thing you see is like they sell directly to you, right? Like Scalebound is pretty much sold directly at the kind of person I am. Like I like playing action games, and
Mm.
Life by You is sold directly to you because you like playing those kind of games, right? So it maybe feels a touch more personal. So I
Yeah.
think it's all those things combined. Because I'm looking at my list and I'm looking at basically like, you know, Tekken. So we had Street Fighter cross Tekken,
Mm.
but there was supposed to be a counter game which was going to be Tekken cross Street Fighter, right? So the
Okay.
first game, you had all the characters come into the Street Fighter world, and all the mechanics were like based around Street Fighter. But then there was supposed to be a deal where it went the other way around, and you basically had all the Street Fighter characters in a three like. It sounds like they're the same game, but they're not because it was like a 3D versus a 2D style, right? And basically, the Street Fighter Cross Tekken, this is going to get a bit confusing, but that game basically did not do very well. And so Tekken Cross Street Fighter, it never happened because I think they were scared of basically being attached to the failure
Mm.
of the first crossover game. So I think what happened instead was on Tekken 7, they introduced one Street Fighter character, and they probably just called it quits after that. We're like, we're gonna use this character, he's a really popular character, and technically we did a sort of crossover style thing.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. We might randomly one day see, you know, all the Street Fighter characters come into Tekken. It's probably more of a likelihood now because Street Fighter 6 is doing really well. But to be continued. But yeah, like, especially when you got a fan base that is like that loyal, and you got to look at it like this, right? All the Tekken player base came over to the Street Fighter world, and they probably just got beaten up because it's not their game. So they're sitting there like, yeah, wait until you come to our world, yeah, then we'll show you what time it is. And they never got the chance to like, you know, take take the Street Fighter dudes to task. So like it's disappointing on so many different levels. And I'm not saying I experience all those levels. I find it so interesting because, you know, maybe it's the same, but maybe it's different. Like when a TV show gets cancelled or when a movie gets cancelled. The only difference I would say is it's probably all time, right? Because how long did you wait for that game to come out?
Uh, I don't know, 2 years maybe?
See, like even if you look at like the game I'm waiting for currently, Devil May Cry, the last one did really good on sales. I think it came out in 2020.
Mm.
So even they've not announced. Okay, look, you got to assume that they got to make another one, right? Because the last one did really well on sales. So now we're saying we've waited a minimum 4 years. They've not said yes, they've not said no. So like, what does that even mean? Whereas with a TV show or a movie, you normally get some kind of updates or you get some
Mm.
kind of like, this is what's happening next to the project or all this kind of stuff. And you can try and find that kind of information with video games as well. but sometimes they're so hooked onto the project that they're working on that you just won't even hear like. So okay, so it's Capcom that makes Devil May Cry. So they're making something like Dragon's Dogma, which takes the whole entire development team. So you're barely gonna even get a leak about number six because they're too busy working on all of that.
Mm.
In fact, Metal Gear Solid Delta, yeah, which is the remake, we didn't really have an idea of it until the trailer came out. There was leaks, but it's like it's so unreliable. And I think 20 so earlier this year, I think we got our first hint that it was coming out.
Yeah.
I think it was in February or something. I'll have to look at the dates. But prior to that, right? So look at this, right? 2024. Prior to that, the last official game was 2015. That means it's 5 plus 4, 9 years, and you're not even getting, you're getting like, oh, maybe this is happening, maybe that's happening. And even then, some of this doesn't even make sense because you're sort of like, okay, so you're telling me that the publisher's making the game, Konami's making the game, but Hideo Kojima is not a part of the game, but you need both of them, but you're not going to get both. Like, how does that even work? So when a leak comes out, you're still trying to connect all the dots, and it's like
Yeah.
it's not making sense. Um, and if you compare that to something like let's say Spider-Man, right? Far from you must have watched Spider-Man, right? Really? Oh, damn. Okay. Well, anyway, like any ensemble movie, okay? Like you're always trying to figure out like how do these contracts work because like a few of these people from the ensemble, they're going to get paid a lot of money, right? So, but even then, you sort of hear like, okay, this actor wants this and this actor wants that, but you don't really get the same level of information necessarily from some of these high-profile games, and it's the not knowing that I think that the not knowing and the time and the all these things that we've spoken about already, like I think it just compounds everything and makes it a little bit worse. And then you can have like so this isn't again necessary. This is not necessarily cancelled, but then you have a game like let's say Devil May Cry 4, right?
Mm.
I play a lot of AAA games, so this is where a lot of my examples come from. But like Devil May Cry 4, right? Everyone knows famously is basically half finished, right? So what will happen is you basically go through all of the maps as one character, and then on the way back you go through all the same maps again as a different character.
Okay.
Um, and so you go through all the maps as Nero, and then you come back through the maps as Dante, right? So Nero basically gives them all like a slap on the wrist, and then Dante basically kills them on his way back, right? The
Yeah.
story's a bit different, all this kind of stuff, whatever, blah blah blah. The interesting thing why a lot of people also, firstly, the backtracking was like made it feel like okay, this is not finished. Then the second thing was like all his weapons that the second character has, they're not even related to the enemies. Like not really. Yeah. So
Interesting.
in Devil May Cry, when you beat a fire enemy, you get a fire weapon. Yeah. When
Yeah.
you beat a ice enemy, you get an ice weapon. Right. It was kind of like that. And when you look at number four, he would beat like a toad and he would get like a metal weapon. And it's like this kind of is going against what you've done for the last three games.
Mm.
So the idea is that there was more enemies, and I sorry.
Bless you.
Okay, so the idea was that there was more enemies, and his new weapons correlated to the enemies that they were unable to put into the game. And I think that in fact there was a few concept arts that showed that there was in fact other enemies they wanted to put into the game. So it's that thing of like you wait so long and it doesn't quite meet your expectations. And I don't think half of this would be half as bad when you don't wait, but because you do wait, like it just makes everything worse. So yeah, I think it's probably the waiting.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that this also relates to something you said in a previous podcast where you were talking about that you don't like playing games that are on servers because if like in case the server goes down. And I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like
just
that's sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I do no, basically this is in relation to like so yeah, a lot of the multiplayer games that are kind of a reason why I don't play it. Like, I'm feeling like my attitude might be changing. I maybe, okay, because I feel like it's kind of that thing of like, is it better to experience it and not experience it at all? And it's like it's two mindsets, right? Because I've seen clips of some games that I never played online, and I see some people playing it and like really enjoying it. But I know those same people are like just like so disappointed that it never carried on. And
Mm.
so I don't need to be a part of the disappointment, but I can be sort of be a part of the fun when I'm watching it.
Yeah.
But then now I'm thinking, like, okay, maybe I should play it while it's live, because then at least I get a chance. But I feel like I'm on the fence now. Like, it feels like maybe it's just worth playing because you might not get the chance again to play it officially. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like you can look at City of Heroes as a good example because
Mm.
I played it. Now we play it with the fan-made servers, and that works fine, right? But that's like a gamble. Like you don't know if the fans are gonna come together and make a server that you can just like play that game and then everything's cool. Like you just never know if that's gonna be the case. So, you know, yeah, it's kind of like this. This is gonna sound kind of dumb, but it's kind of like this, yeah. When Domino's do like a limited edition flavor of pizza, you know what? This actually happens a lot here. Yeah, like they'll make a limited edition item, food item of whatever. You will love that food item. You'll have it every day for like a solid month. Yeah, then bam, one day it's just gone. Never again. Never. Like if you're lucky, you'll have to wait the year for the season to come back around. Maybe. Then maybe, and you're like, you never get to try it again. You're like, oh man, like it just bugs you like forever. It's like an itch you can never scratch because they're not making it and they just decided like, yeah, we're just not gonna do it. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking myself back into not trying it. I don't know.
But I think it's a reflection on that disappointment because
Yeah,
even like with games, like for example, there's a game called Icarus, which is completely up my street because it's open world simulation, um, like base building, and I love games like that. Like, give me a base building game where I can go around, collect resources, like develop my skill tree, and I'm happy. But it is a multiplayer game in terms of you can play it by yourself, but because there's like different skill trees, obviously for different skills, um, if you kind of like if I go down like the building route, that means I don't have like the skills to maybe do the hunting or the fighting, and it's like it's probably better to play this as a group so that someone can go off and do that bit and I can do the bit that I really want to do. I could try and do it all, but that doesn't sound as fun to try and do everything. And then like the people that I would play with, because I've played other games with them and they're great and I love playing games with them because like we played Trauma together, we played Minecraft for a little while, and it's like, oh, but will I play this? Will I be able to find another group if you decide actually we're done with this game now?
yeah,
And it's just like it
yeah,
is your
yeah, yeah,
prerogative to be able to say, I'm not feeling this game, let's move on.
yeah.
But
Oh man, yeah,
it's like for me, I was like, so I just haven't started it. I watched them play it, and I'm like, and they're like, oh, you'd love this, and I was like, yeah, I probably would, but this is the first time you've played it in like 6 months, and it was just ad hoc because you were just like, oh, we
yeah.
haven't played that in a while, and I was like,
You know
I
what?
just happened to be here.
You just unlocked a memory. Like when I used to play City of Heroes, like
Mm.
literally it was exactly that. It's like when people just decide to stop playing, you're just like, okay, like I need a healer, I need a this, I need a that. We're doing a raid. Like you can't do the raid because they don't want to play, but they're allowed to say they don't want to play.
Yep.
But does that mean I'm done with the game? It must mean I'm done with the game because no one else. Oh man,
Yeah.
yeah, that's pain. That is pain.
I think that's why I've always like
Uh,
gravitated towards single player games. Um, Even though, oh, yesterday I was playing, I think I told you this, Chained Together, which is like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, because I saw some like let's plays for it, and I was like, that looks kind of fun. Um, so stupid, and
I've seen it. I've seen.
And then I didn't watch any more Let's Plays because I was like, oh, I actually want to play this, which is kind of like how I do things. Like if I watch a Let's Play, I'm like, oh, I want to play this. I'll pause the Let's Play to play it and then finish it when I've finished it. I have not finished Chain Together. I feel like I got, I say, oh, it's like I feel like we got really, really high, and I was quite proud of us. We saw the sunlight. We did not escape, but the sun was there, which was quite beautiful as it like shone through the clouds as we fell when I tripped over a skull. But yeah, I think that like games like that are different because you can play that game by yourself because there is like an AI element or a practice element, which I also didn't do because I was like, I want it to be authentic. I will fall as many times as I need to fall. But yeah, yeah, that I think that's really upsetting more than anything. Games when you're like, oh, I guess I'm done with it now because you're all done with it.
I know, I know. I think I'm gonna see if actually, when I restarted, see if I need to reinstall everything because my SSD failed. I think it's because I partitioned it, blah blah blah. But anyway, I fixed it now. That's why I'm using it now. But I need to reinstall like everything, including City of Heroes.
Mm.
And I did sort of convince someone to play it at work, and he was like fully addicted to it at one point. And then I told him to play it, but then I never played it with him, so now I feel bad. So I think at some point I'm gonna try and see if I can get a group together. The only thing is though, you know what? Um, I read online somewhere about this game. This is a bit of a tangent, but
Mhm.
you know, someone was saying online something like, the reason it died is because it stopped getting supported. And I was like, oh, I don't care if if it's not getting any new updates. Like, I don't care. I'll still play it. And it still has a lot of storyline, a lot of those built-in quests, like a lot of different things you can still do, right? Like, I think probably some things you have to find a way to do unofficially. But anyway, you can play a lot of that game, like maybe 70%, maybe all of it. I probably just don't know. The only thing that I do understand from that comment now is basically like some of the fun was when you get like seasonal updates where you go somewhere and there's like it's Halloween and there's like a box and you're like, oh, this is like limited edition like Halloween cape, and you're like, oh, this is cool, like, and it just felt like you were sort of having this dialogue with the developers because they knew you like stuff, then they would put the stuff you like back into the game.
Yeah.
And it just made it feel like more alive. And like now when I play it, I can play it. Not that I have done this, but I can play it for like 3, 4 months in a row, and it will always be the same as what it was from month one to month seven. But if you
Mm.
play like I don't know, like Final Fantasy 14 online or something, then there will always be something different that makes it feel like okay, like the feedback is being listened to. And I'm not trying to put digs at the fan community because that's amazing that they even brought it back to life.
Yeah.
um I think it's more just like nostalgic sadness of like wanting it to be like more alive. But you know what, I will reinstall it at some point, I think. um but speaking of game development and people developing games, um I have the next topic, which is my last topic.
Mhm.
You ready for it?
Go on then.
Okay, this is I think this is quite an interesting topic, right? So how significant is the impact when a beloved person leaves a development team? Yeah, and I'll explain, right?
Oh, whoops. Sorry. 1 second. Okay, go on.
Wait, you're still minimized.
Oh,
How did that happen?
1 second. Oh.
Technical issues. We need like like the multicolored face, the TV thing.
Ah, fun times. Isn't that what everybody dreams of? Ugh, why is
Oh,
this not? Ah, I'm sure it's fine.
so everything good?
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're back. You're back. You're
Okay.
back.
Well,
All right.
we can edit that out.
Well, listen, this is the start, okay? We're starting up. I think we'll leave it in. Let people know. We're learning, We're not pros at this. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Um, that's why you're watching, you know, you want something new, and there you go. Those things happen when, you know, when you're doing new stuff. So okay, so basically, yeah, like I was thinking of this the other day, and I find it so interesting when a single like, you know, sometimes you get that thought of like, how important is one person? Like, you know, what change can one person affect? um you know, in multiple senses, right? And it,
Mm.
not trying to get too philosophical here, but like, yeah, how much can one person really affect it? And you know what, when I was thinking of this question, I was genuinely thinking about like video games and video game development, because genuinely I really do believe that one person can like make a massive impact on how things get developed.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, again, like I play a lot of AAA games, so I'm looking at some of these people that have directed some of my favorite AAA games, right? And I'm not using this as an excuse to talk about Hideo Kojima. Okay, like we can get into that if you want. Like I'm not bothered. He is on my list, but anyway, um, basically, I was thinking about this person. Yeah, his name is Sefton Hill, and he basically made. He was the director. I think the video game director for Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, and Batman Arkham Knight. Arguably some of the best comic book games like out right now, like trilogy of any kind that you could play. They have
Mm.
their you know, ups and downs. And you know, I think the team must have liked him a bit. You know, and I'll tell you why. It's because you look at Arkham Knight, which is the third installment of the game. He's actually in the game right at the beginning, right? So they modeled him, they put him in there as a little Easter egg and all this kind of stuff. And the only other thing I know about like Easter eggs to real life people in that game specifically, his name was Paul Dini, I think, and he basically wrote like some of the most iconic Batman stories like in the world, right? I think he helped write some of the Batman animated series. He like some of the Justice League, Batman Beyond. Like I could probably write like a list of like stuff that he's been involved in, and he was also referenced in the game, right?
Mm.
He was referenced as, I think it was called Paul's Diner, and that's like, you know, his name's Paul Dini, Paul Diner. Do you get it, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, man, like he really must have had some kind of high level impact on how the team like was operating, because not only do you get like referential stuff like that, but you also get like a game that is like so imbued with passion. Now to carry on, right? Then you got a game like Suicide Squad, which is made by the same company, and you see a lot of the characteristics that they did have, it sort of fell by the wayside a bit. And they left the company, right? They didn't work there anymore. I think they made one VR game, and it just says that they left on good terms, which, you know, we can only speculate like what those terms were. Like, you know, it's hard for me to think of like someone who has been a part of a company for like 10 years or whatever, worked so intimately with like a very well regarded character. It's not like he was working on some, you know, I don't know, like some rabbit character. I don't know, right? He worked on, you know, Batman. Like that's crazy. Like that's
Mm.
such a good IP. And not only did he work on that, like everyone loved those games. So for you to walk away from that, like, you know, again, maybe it's other stuff. Maybe he had enough money to start his own game studio, which I think he did, is doing or did do.
Mm.
Maybe it's a bunch of other stuff that we don't know. But I just find it so interesting. Like someone like him can walk away from it, and then you get a game like Suicide Squad, and it's literally tanks like on every metric possible. It's like done objectively worse than those games. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts on that was really.
Well, I was super disappointed with the Suicide Squad, but I was disappointed from the aspect of like the art style. I not well, not the art style, but the costume design. I just
Okay.
I'm trying to remember exactly because I remember seeing it and thinking, hmm, I don't I don't like it. I don't hate it, but I don't like it. But I can't remember
Was
exactly what
there,
it was. And then
was there a
the
particular
voice.
character that,
Sorry, go on.
was there a particular character that stood out that you were like, this design is not doing it for me?
That's what I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to look like which one because I'm sure there were. Oh no, it was all of them. All of it. I was just like, no, I don't like it. And like, there's nothing to say. That was just me personally. I was like, no, there's something about it that it doesn't. It just doesn't. It doesn't rub me the right way. It's not. It's not what. It kind of like. It kind of looked like they had looked at things like Fortnite and Overwatch and tried to copy that
Oh, yeah,
style of
yeah.
garment and just kind of like paste over this idea of DC. And it's just like, no, DC has its own unique kind of like not just DC, but each character has its own like unique sort of dress sense and the way that they behave, and it's part of their personality. It's not just a costume. And I feel that that was kind of completely lost in the way that they kind of dressed them up, and that made me feel kind of like I wanted that comic book experience of like each character's costume was like it's a reveal. Like when you read a comic, especially a DC comic, each
That's a
character's
good.
like it's their costume reveal. It's like I am focused in this moment on you and everything you're wearing down to like what your hair looks like and what piercings you have. I want to know. Even if you are an arbitrary character and in the next scene I will never see you again, it feels like important in that moment, and I'm going to go back and like double check things like, oh, were you wearing that before? Did you always have a gun? And it's just like the costume, especially the Harley Quinn costume. I I suppose it's because she's been moving further and further away from her original design, and I get it. And I think that what annoys me about that is that games are a media, but they are not movies, they are not films, and so they do not have to reflect that. And it kind of felt like it was trying to reflect like the popularity of things like I was saying, like popular games, but also reflect on the way that the movies were. And it's like, but you're not following the movie storyline. You don't have any of the movie actors. You don't even have any of like the facial captures of any of the movie actors. This is a completely different game. You've got some characters that weren't in the movies. You could just do whatever you wanted. You could be true to the comics. You didn't even have to have a photorealistic art style. It wasn't necessary. And like some of the Batman games, like they go photorealistic, and I'm not gonna lie, it was too bright. And I know this is ridiculous, but it's Arkham. Arkham is dark. It's grimy. It was just too bold and pop arty. And I was like, I get it in terms of you were trying to appeal to maybe a younger market and like have those bold colors, but that's not what it is, and that's not what it's ever been. And it's just, you've completely broken the immersion for me because everything is too colorful, it's too bright, it's not what
Right.
I wanted or expected from you. And I don't like the costumes and the voice actors. They weren't bad, they were great voice actors, they just didn't match the characters for me, so that kind of brought me out of it. Like I didn't like the voice of Harley Quinn for Harley Quinn. Not that I didn't think her voice actor was good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Harley Quinn's might have been one of the original voices that like she's done it a bunch of times before. So I don't think it was a new person. It could have just been this happens a lot actually. It could have been the voice director. Like it could have been the actual director because
Maybe.
I've seen a few times where recently, oh my God, you know which game? Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, by the way, one of my favorite games,
Mm.
one of my absolute favorite games. They did a remaster, and the voice delivery was so like what like on this on a balance of scales, it was probably average. But I think the previous voice actor, he nailed it. Like he completely nailed it, right? And it really brings you into the world, like what you're saying with the immersion. And so the remaster was like they changed the voice actor completely. Fair enough, whatever. But then the delivery was like it wasn't quite there. And but then you had the same voice actor in Final Fantasy Rebirth, and his delivery was like more like pretty, a good amount better. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. So you're watching that now, and you're like, it must have been the director. And I watched this YouTuber online, and he's like a voice actor, right? And he
Yeah,
said that on what I don't think he was talking about that game specifically, but he was saying like oftentimes it's like the direction, and if you don't get good direction, like you can basically sound like two different people, but it won't necessarily be like the actor doesn't have range. Like, does it even make sense to hire someone who's not good at voice acting? So sometimes it's like the direction that makes them like deliver a line in a certain way, and now you have the performance you have. Um,
I must admit, I just
okay,
googled Tara Strong, and
yeah,
the
she's
first
good.
line is it's time to stop casting her as Harley Quinn. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only one that was like, it's she's not a bad actor. She's a brilliant voice actor. She's just not what I would imagine Harley Quinn to sound like. And I feel bad
I'm just
saying because it's like
surprised.
that's someone's job, that's their livelihood, and like someone picked her because she embodied what they wanted to express. And then I'm there as like the person at the end when all the hard work's been done, just like, nah, don't like it.
Listen, don't you worry about Tara Strong. She's doing very well for herself, right? She's living a good life. Don't worry about her. Um, but you know what though? I might have to disagree with you a little bit. I'll be honest. I think she was one of the OG Harley Quinns. I've always liked her as Harley Quinn. I haven't fully played through this game. I've watched bits of it, so I don't know what her performance is like. I just know that the story is maybe not that good. Can you search something for me though? I want you to see something actually. I want to see what you think of this.
Go on then.
Search Guardians of the Galaxy PS5. I want to get your opinion on their outfits actually, since we're talking about that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think I think I agree with you in terms of like the outfits and all this kind of stuff and the reveals. Going back to the topic a bit about you know if I was to try and frame it with the topic, like, do you think this person who left, had an impact to that degree across the board with all of this stuff then? Because when you look at the last games, a lot of these design elements and quirks were present in a way where you know what, I can actually give you a direct example. Batman Arkham Knight, when you saw Firefly for the first time, he wasn't actually in the game for very long, but when you saw his whole reveal of like he's got all these jets and like, it was so different, but it fit a part of what they were doing, right? And do you think then, like to your point about the outfits and everything like that, do you think one person has that much of a far-reaching impact?
Um, yes, but I think there's also the element of um. So, for example, Red Dwarf. When
Okay.
the season, I think 1 and 2, there are two writers, and I think that they are amazing. And at some point, I can't remember which season it is, they had a little bit of a falling out, and one of them left. And
Okay.
I think there was like a whole court case involved, and one of them got the book rights, and he rewrote the first couple of episodes in books, adding like what I'm assuming he wanted to add in the actual filming of it and wasn't able to. And then the other guy, stayed on as the writer for the seasons. Arguably my least favorite seasons, not because he's not a good writer, but because the guy that left to do the books, which I loved, he was very kind of like descriptive and technical, and there was always like a moral element to the stories about kind of like gender norms or kind of like societal norms or any something about morals. Like there was usually at the end of each episode you learnt something, or there was a reflection on, oh actually I've always thought that way, and now I've had this it put in this way. Like there's an episode where they go to another universe. Spoilers if you haven't watched it, sorry. And everything in the other universe is the same apart from everything is gender swapped. So they meet themselves as women, and they're like, oh, and then one of them, I can't remember what happens, but she's like being really inappropriate towards him, and he was um, like, I don't want this. I'm saying no, and she's like, oh, are you one of those like masculinists? And then he's like, what? And it's like, and then she's like, oh well, it's not a woman-centered world anymore, not since the burning of the jockstrap in the 60s. And it's like all of the things are kind of mirrored, and it's so funny. And then there's a bit where two of them sleep together, and he wakes up, and then he's like, oh, I can't believe I've done this. And then he's like, and then they're like, oh, because you're in this universe, men get pregnant. And then he's like, what? How could you do this to me? How could you sleep with me knowing I didn't have perfection? And then she's like, well, you might not get pregnant. You might be lucky. And then he's like, oh my gosh. But it's him. It's like that would have been his behavior to any other woman. So it's just him reacting to himself because he slept with himself. And so it's like that reflection on, actually, this is your own attitude, but now you're on the other side of being the person receiving how you would have acted. And it's like such a clever episode. And then at the end, he is pregnant with twins, but that's neither here nor there. And it's like, it's such a funny episode because it's hilarious, and there's lots of kind of like jokes and in jokes in it, but it does have like a reflection on, actually, when you think of it in that way and reflect on that idea of like masculinity and femininity, it kind of like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Like there's a bit where he's like, oh, she's trying to impress me by burping this song, and then his friend's like, isn't that what you do? And he was like, yeah, but when I do it, it's classy. I don't want a girl that does that. And so it's like, that's an interesting reflection on like even reflecting on yourself. And then when he left, the other guy doesn't have that reflection on kind of like moralistic, everything is like a joke, everything's quite sexist, there's no balance. And I was like, oh, I liked you when you were together, because the other guy, he everything he writes is really good, it's really immersive, but he doesn't have that kind of like tongue in cheek, that kind of like, oh, that's a slightly inappropriate joke but it's still quite funny. He's very matter of fact, which I also love. But I was like, when you were together, you created something unique because you had to offset each other, which is probably why you had an argument and had to split apart. I can completely see why you didn't mesh, but it was like, together you had something and you were able to offset each other in a way, and probably coming from different walks of life, able to say, oh, we do this, or we do this because, or like we have this joke here because it offsets this joke later on, and people will feel like they're following it in a way that if you try and do like a whole long story, it might just be a bit too complicated, like reading an essay or like a report for people. And so I feel like there's an element of, when someone leaves a company, they take with them not just their input, but their practice and what they've learned, their experiences of like, okay, people don't like when you do that. In the past, we found that our specific fan base, they don't like that. They don't like when you use that sound. They don't like when you have a like a cut scene too close together to another or whatever. And it's like, you can't pass those on in like a long document, because you can't. It's like, it's an in a moment kind of thing when someone's like, oh, look at this thing I've made. It's like, okay, this is brilliant, but change that. And you're like, oh, okay. And I think that you take that with you. So maybe he took more than just his like input, he took his experience with him. And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, who did you leave behind? Did you have like a mentee, or did you take them with you to your new company, or did they leave thinking, oh, now I can go somewhere else? And so like, were you not the only one to leave, but just like the most important one? But then the people who are your prodigies, they went somewhere else as well, so you left nothing.
Yeah.
Like a void.
I think you basically hit on like multiple things there, right there, which is, I think it's that in the moment, like, judgment calls that they know how to execute in such a meaningful way. Because I think you're completely right. I think when you focus on those type of people, you think purely of their experience, which is still important, right? The experience is still important. And in fact, you could say that the experience links directly to those in the moment decisions. But, unless, I feel like there's, even though they're linked, if you lose that person, you kind of have to replace those two aspects with like two different people. Like, you're not necessarily gonna have someone who's really experienced that can also deliver in the moment decision making.
Mm.
So I think you've hit on some really good points there, to be honest with you, because that basically encapsulates like a lot of what I'm thinking, but I wasn't able to articulate. um Even like what you said about the handover aspect of it, like did they leave someone with the experience? Like again, like I couldn't agree with you more, genuinely. Like, you know, the mentees and like who they were teaching and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, um oftentimes when people do leave, yeah, you're right, like they leave with who they work closest with, or who they work the best with. Like they're going to leave with those people because those people have a level of loyalty to them. Like if you look at Hideo Kojima, he left with like one of the most iconic art directors that basically helped him make like half of Metal Gear, right?
Mm.
So, you know, now you see the combination of like the amazing direction that Kojima does in the writing, and then you have the art director, which is arguably the two like critical elements of, you know, making a game, and they've both left. And you know that leaves a lasting effect, you know, on the, or where you left, you know, because you we can see Hideo Kojima, you know, lasting impact, because when he left and they made Metal Gear Survive, which is, we don't like talking about that, but they, you know, is the first game they made without him. You know, there's an Easter egg that basically says Hideo Kojima Productions Forever. Like, so that means they snuck that Easter egg in basically to pay respect. So the people that remained there for their livelihood, they still didn't believe in what they were doing necessarily, because they knew a lot of that passion went with him, and they still honored it somehow. So, you know, you can see that actually it does make a big difference. This is the last point I want to make on this, and then maybe we'll call it a day.
Mhm.
The one thing that I feel has gone massively underreported. His name is Bruce Straley, and he basically co-wrote Last of Us One. Now, me, I am not the biggest Last of Us fan. Yeah, you will not catch me saying like it changed my life. Da 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 da. Like, it was a good game. I enjoyed it. It was a good experience. But I genuinely think that his lack of involvement in the second game is what led to its downfall. Because, like, but again, you know, I'm not the biggest fan, but by any metric, you will notice that Last of Us 2 did not get as well received compared to the first game, right?
Mm.
And they know that themselves because they've remastered Last of Us 1 like multiple times. They've done it once already for PS4 generation. They've done it again with the new engine for PS5. So they keep wanting to go back to Last of Us 1 because it was the most well received. And and I think it was written by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley together on the first one. And then the second one, Bruce Straley left, and it left Neil, and he hired someone else. This someone else he hired, I think she wrote Westworld or something, but she didn't really have video game experience. Look,
Mm.
I'm not saying it's bad that she didn't have the video game experience. Like, that is its own separate topic almost by itself. Like, I'm not too fussed about what she did and didn't bring to the table. My focus is more on like what did we actually lose when Bruce left? Because I think he also helped write Uncharted,
Yeah, I just looked it up.
Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think he helped write a bunch of other stuff that you will recognize, like the stuff he's worked on.
Mm.
So so I feel like, yeah, okay, you can make that case of what she brought, what she didn't bring. I'm not really that interested in that. But, you know, to the point of the topic is this, right? How significant is one person when they're very beloved and when the team is behind the ideas, what they're delivering? Because I think it's very, in my opinion, it's quite clear cut what brought to the table on the first game and how iconic that first game was versus how massively the drop off was on the second game. And look, I've completed both the games, right? I don't think the drop off in the second game was necessarily due to the mechanics or the visuals. So it really leaves one thing in question, which is the story. And everyone feels a very strong way about the story of the second game. And again, like, I don't want to say it's this person, it's that person, this is whose fault it is, this is who should have been a part of it, but I can't help but feel like Bruce Straley brought something very special to the table, and we lost something special when he left. And I'm not saying other people don't have that. I think you do, they can have that. I just think that yeah, I don't think that they managed to recapture what he did bring. Because if they did were able to recapture it, maybe we would have a better game now. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
the game would, and I don't think they were able to do that, unfortunately. Look, I want, even though I'm not a big fan, I would have liked that game to succeed. Because ultimately what that means is better games moving forward, right? Whether you like the story or not, I enjoyed the mechanics, I enjoyed the story was okay and this and that. And in fact, yeah, Neil Druckmann, who is basically you could argue is the main creator now,
yeah.
he cited Metal Gear Solid 2 as one of his inspirations, right? So by all accounts, it should be something that really speaks to me. And in some way it does because of that statement, but you can tell it still failed. Like it wasn't what it needed to be. Um, and I just think that's a crying shame because it could have been 10 times better. And now it's basically lost so much steam going into a third game because, let's face it, they're making a TV show. They've done season one, they've done season two, they've made two of the games, which probably still sold pretty well. I find it hard to think that they're just going to leave it on the cutting room floor now because the second game didn't do very well. So they are
Mm,
going to make a third one, and it's such a shame because again, like I'm not a massive fan, but you can tell the excitement has just been sucked completely out of it. And you know what's funny? The funny thing is, they might actually have to follow Kojima's path now. So I'll explain, yeah, because the second game, he said it was like Metal Gear 2. Now Metal Gear 3 is a prequel, right? So you'd have to make the case that Last of Us has to make a prequel now, so it can go back to the characters that everyone actually liked. Do you see what I mean? So it's
yeah.
like they're in this situation where they kind of have to go back a bit. So now that you're drawing even more inspiration from that, but you're but look, Metal Gear and Kojima did it in a very organic way. You can make the case, all right? Like they did get blowback from number two. Metal Gear Solid did get blowback from number two because of the protagonist swap and all this kind of stuff, but relatively organic, let's say.
Mm,
Now, you look at Last of Us, and if you see Last of Us 3, you're going to look at it like you were forced to do that. Do you know what I mean? Because it
mm,
was such a visceral reaction. And, all the criticism Metal Gear Solid 2 did get, it was like pre internet. It was like pre or early internet. So that criticism was never going to be like as visceral as what you got now. So everyone is just going to comment and say, yeah, you went back to those characters. You made a prequel to number two because you you had to, like you had no other choice. Um, and I think it's such a shame. And I think, yeah, my personal theory is that I think a big part of it was that single person who did have a very big impact on the team, on the writers' team, on the direction. And now we have what we have. And again, it's funny because I'm not even that much of a fan. And I'm looking at it and I'm disappointed. I'm like, oh, that's sad. Um, yeah, sad really. It's just the whole sad state of affairs. And I hope they can prove me wrong. I hope they can draw that excitement back into number three. Um, I hope they can win some people over because again, I just want the industry to do well. I don't care which, indie, this, that, whatever. Like, I don't necessarily care who does well. I just like to see, even if it's not something I'm into, I like to see it do well because then it just means that, maybe down the line an experience will come that really connects with me. But that's not going to happen if they're doing poorly. You know what I mean?
I think
Um,
I'm hoping that the AAA industry can survive because while I don't really play AAA games, they are integral to other things. And when I say that, I mean in terms of like consoles won't be developed if there aren't AAA games to support them. It's like it's just the truth. It's like indie games are great and they could support them, but it's unlikely because it's easier to port a game to things like PC where it's like PC's doing okay because it's got so many other things that you require a PC for that their development and their continued love, like they'll be fine. But with console, they rely on those AAA games because it's like if you don't have those, if a game doesn't come out or there's not a game on like like especially before, I never got an Xbox because I couldn't see any games that I was like, there's like one or two games where I'm like, oh yeah, I would buy that. That's why I never got a PlayStation 3 because I was like, there's nothing, it's not worth buying it. And I feel like that's the thing. It's like maybe people will buy it, but then will they keep it? And then will they encourage other people to get it? Because a lot of things like word of mouth, like when you say to your friends, "Oh, you got to play this game with me," and then they've got to like get the PC, get the console, get the like whatever it is to play with you. There's that kind of encouragement of like, no, 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 this is really good. Um, and I feel like AAA games need to survive so that consoles can survive because a console is not a PC, and I don't think it should ever try. I'm sure we've discussed this before. It should never try to be a PC. It shouldn't be trying to meet that kind of refresh rate, that kind of like graphics hardware. It's a console. It's not designed for that, and it doesn't need to do that. If you want that, get a PC. And it's like even like cheaper PCs and like because if you have the ability to get a console, but you're looking for something more graphically um like updated, then you could probably save that money and get a PC and probably get a good one. Consoles are expensive now. But I just think that you need that because the developments in, especially like the things that PlayStation have developed in just the chipsets and the things that they can and can't do, despite their lack of being able to give me my backward compatibility. Um, yeah, it's like you still made lots of headway, but you wouldn't have been able to do that if people didn't want the consoles, if people didn't want to play the games. And so it's like, oh, AAA industry, you need to survive just for that reason because like the developments that will happen, the things that will advance, because even like the controllers, which you can still use on PC to play some games, it's like I need you to evolve so that you can create better controllers so I can use them on the PC in a very selfish, simplistic way. But in an actual way, it's like no, no, no. The industry needs to survive so that developments can be made, so that the future of gaming can develop and continue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I guess just to wrap up, I think all we can really say is that, I hope that some people can mend relationships. Like I'd love to see, kind of a situation sort of like what happened with Apple and Steve Jobs, where Steve Jobs famously left the company, then he started his own company, then Apple bought it back so he could be part of it again. And look, you can almost see that being able to play out in real time with other developers. Sefton Hill left and he started his own company. I think Bruce Straley left and he started his own company. Kojima left and he started his own company. So, these bigger companies, if they want to like build a bridge, they can, unfortunately sink some money into buying these companies back to get the talent back, which is, it's a sad way of things happening, but it breaks my heart because I don't see it happening, but I wish it could. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not impossible. Um,
I think
but
that
yeah,
might be the problem though, like that
I
need
don't
to
know.
own everything. Why can't you just collaborate with those companies?
Even that, I would be happy with that. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying it from a point of view of like what I have seen some companies do is
Mm,
buy back the tech, and even collaboration would be fine. And I think maybe in some small way they might be doing it behind the scenes. Like we might not even be privy to how they are collaborating. At the end of the day, I like to think Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann might be friends. He might drop a text and say, "Look, I'm thinking of doing something to these characters. What do you think?" Do you know what I mean? Like it's not impossible.
yeah.
um we just will never necessarily know the full story of some of this stuff. And if we ever had the chance to interview them, I have you just don't even know how they'd receive that question. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Because there must be such a tumultuous relationship between these people that it could just basically derail the whole thing. Like you just don't even know. Like, yeah, who knows? Who knows? Anyway, we should probably call it there.
Yep.
I I gotta go get some fried rice of some kind, I believe. So please subscribe. We are enjoying this, but it's nice to know that other people also enjoy. So
Yep.
please subscribe mainly on our YouTube if you can. Um, yeah,
Yep. What he said. Like,
that's it.
subscribe, share. Woo!
Goodbye.